The house sat just beyond the last HOA sign, where the pavement narrowed and the rules quietly ended. That boundary mattered more than most people realize. On one side, committees and fines. On the other, deeds and law. I bought the place because of that line. Closing was clean. Survey verified. County records updated. Taxes paid. The kind of purchase that leaves no loose ends. I moved in slowly, fixing small things, learning the land, enjoying the silence that comes from not being managed by strangers with clipboards. That silence didn't last. She showed up 3 days after the moving truck left. No notice. No introduction. Just a woman in an HOA vest pacing my driveway like it was already hers. She talked at my door, not to it. Explained that my house should have been included in the community, that my absence from the HOA was an administrative error. Errors don't come with threats. She waved papers that stopped being relevant at the subdivision entrance, claimed enforcement authority, claimed emergency powers, claimed the board could compel compliance. The words escalated fast when I didn't react. Her voice did. She told me the HOA would seize the property if I refused to cooperate, that they'd involve law enforcement, that they'd do whatever it took to bring me under their control. She said it loud enough for neighbors to hear, like volume could create jurisdiction. I didn't argue. I didn't interrupt. I let her finish. Then I told her something simple. The house wasn't in her HOA. Never had been. Never would be. The boundary was clear, recorded, and enforced by the county, not her board. I reminded her that stepping onto my land to issue threats wasn't enforcement. It was trespass. That's when she lost control, completely. Her posture changed. Her voice broke into something sharp and frantic. She repeated the threat, louder, angrier, certain that intimidation was the last tool left. People like her confuse authority with noise. When one fails, they lean harder on the other. I asked her to leave. She refused. So I documented everything. Time, location, statements, the way she blocked my driveway, the way she shouted about force like it was policy instead of a liability. She stormed off eventually, promising consequences. What she didn't understand yet was that consequences don't come from shouting. They come from records. The consequences arrived faster than she expected, but not in the way she imagined. That afternoon, I didn't call the HOA. I didn't post online. I didn't confront anyone. I filed a report, not an emotional one, a factual one. Trespass, harassment, threatening statements made under the false claim of authority. Attached were photos, audio, and a copy of the survey that showed exactly where the HOA boundary ended and my property began. Paperwork has a way of cooling tempers. By the next morning, the HOA president emailed me. The tone was polite to the point of desperation. He said there had been a misunderstanding. He said the woman was overzealous. He said they would look into it. None of that addressed the threat. I replied with one sentence and attachments. The attachments did the talking. They included the county plat map, the deed, and a transcript of her statements. When someone threatens force while claiming authority they don't have, it stops being a community issue. It becomes a legal one. And legal issues don't care about intent. They care about evidence. The HOA scheduled an emergency board meeting that night. I didn't attend. I didn't need to. The room was already full of problems they couldn't vote away. Neighbors started asking questions. Why was an HOA representative at a non-HOA house? Why were there threats? Why did the HOA claim power beyond its borders? People who had paid dues for years don't like finding out their board improvises authority. The board's attorney reviewed the materials and immediately advised silence. That advice didn't sit well with Karen. She posted anyway. claimed she was protecting the community, claimed I was non-compliant, claimed the HOA had rights. Those posts were archived within minutes because now there was a pattern. The county responded first. They confirmed the boundary publicly, issued a clarification letter stating the property was outside HOA jurisdiction and always had been. That letter went into the HOA's file. Once something is in the file, it doesn't leave. Then came the warning, not to me, to the HOA. It stated clearly that any further attempt to enforce rules, issue fines, or threaten action against properties outside their boundary would expose the association to liability. The words were calm. The implication wasn't. Karen was removed from enforcement duties that same day. She didn't resign. She was sidelined. Her badge returned. Her access revoked. The board framed it as temporary. Everyone knew better. Residents noticed her absence immediately. The loudest person in the room had gone quiet. When she did speak, it was online, vague and defensive, no longer claiming authority. Just grievance. The HOA sent me a formal apology, not for her behavior, for the confusion. They asked for cooperation. They asked for patience. They asked me to let things cool down. I agreed to none of it because the issue wasn't temperature. It was trust. They had allowed someone to threaten force on private land under their banner. That doesn't cool off on its own. It has to be corrected. The final step was administrative. I requested a no trespass notice be recorded against the HOA for my property. It didn't ban residents. It banned enforcement. A clean line drawn in the system. Any future entry would require consent or a warrant. The HOA signed it. Quietly, Karen stopped driving past my house, stopped posting, stopped being mentioned in meeting minutes. When power disappears, it takes the person attached to it with it. The house stayed quiet again. The boundary stayed where it always was, and the HOA learned something they should have known from the beginning. You can't seize what you don't control. And when you threaten force without authority, the system remembers longer than people do. The aftermath was quiet but absolute. Karen no longer patrolled the street. Board meetings didn't mention my property. The HOA website quietly removed the map that had extended their authority beyond reality. They never admitted fault, never apologized publicly, but the consequences were written in the records. Neighbors began to notice the shift. The loudest, most aggressive enforcer in the community had been neutralized, not with confrontation, but with evidence, law, and patience. The authority she assumed for herself evaporated, leaving only documentation behind. The house remained mine, completely outside the HOA's reach. No fines, no threats, no interruptions. The forested lot stayed quiet. My driveway stayed open. The lesson for the HOA was clear. Confidence doesn't create jurisdiction, and yelling doesn't establish ownership. Authority exists on paper first, not in volume or intimidation. Karen lost because she ignored boundaries that were real, recorded, and enforceable. Sometimes the quietest enforcement is the most permanent. Time passed, and the HOA never tried again. Karen faded into the background, her threats a memory. The neighborhood adjusted to reality. My land was mine, outside their control. Signs, newsletters, and past claims became irrelevant. The house remained a sanctuary. Boundaries were respected because they were legal, not assumed. Authority backed by records, not noise, always wins. Karen's shouting had vanished, replaced by silence. And in that silence, the rule of law had its final word.